I can still remember that night like it happened yesterday. I was sitting there, watching the evening news on the old TV, when I noticed Penny across the room. She had this look on her face, curious, yet conflicted. The problem was, she couldn't bring herself to tell me what was on her mind. Why? Well, two reasons really. First, I don't think she could even believe it herself. And second, she knew that if she brought it up, she'd be opening a can of worms she'd rather keep tightly shut. To understand it all, I have to rewind a bit, about a year before that night. We'd bought this big old farmhouse out in the country about 5 or 6 years ago. It came with a couple of old stone barns, perfect for conversion. While we lived in the farmhouse, we had the builders turn the bigger barn into our dream home. Or rather, the builders did the work, we were just there to make sure everything went according to plan. Once we moved into the barn, we had them give the farmhouse a quick update and, at the same time, convert the smaller barn into a holiday cottage. The original plan was to sell the farmhouse and rent out the holiday cottage during the summer. But as it turns out, things didn't go exactly as planned. There was a nearby USAF base, and we ended up renting the farmhouse to an officer and his family for about a year. He didn't want to buy since he wasn't staying in England for long. Sure, selling the place could have brought in a nice lump sum, but the rent he offered was too good to pass up. One of his colleagues even rented the holiday cottage at a great rate. Penny and I were quite pleased with the arrangement. 18 months later, both families' tours ended, and they went back to the States. They were lovely people, and Penny and I had gotten along great with them. For some reason, we didn't put the house back on the market. We'd been so happy with the rental income that we decided to give it another go. One evening, I came home from work and was met at the door by Penny, who had this massive grin on her face. "I rented out the house," she said excitedly. "The contracts are all signed and everything." She caught me completely off guard. "Wait, what do you mean you rented out the house?" I asked, probably sounding shocked, and maybe a little annoyed. "To whom, and without me even meeting them? Did you even check their references?" Her smile faltered a bit. "Oh, we don't need references for these people, Pete. You're never going to believe who they are." "Well, who they are doesn't matter as much as whether they'll pay the rent on time," I said. "How about a year up front, in cash?" "Well, a check actually. Does that suit you?" "That sounds a bit too good to be true. Who are they? Are they millionaires or something?" "No. Well, maybe. I don't know. But the TV company's paying the rent for them." "Okay, now I'm really lost. Who are these people you rented the house to?" "Brooke Marsh, the TV news anchor, and her husband. You know, the actor Stephen Walters." "Stephen Walters? Christ, I thought he died a couple of years ago. Wasn't there a story about a bad accident on the news?" "No, he wasn't killed, but he did have a serious accident. He says he's almost fully recovered now and looks just as dreamy as before." From the silly grin on Penny's face, I could tell she liked the idea of having a film star as a tenant. I never understood why people fawn over celebrities. They're just regular people like the rest of us. Though, I had to admit, Stephen Walters was a good-looking guy. They were looking for somewhere quiet, away from it all, where Stephen could recover. And Brooke is going to be presenting a daytime talk show. They thought this place was perfect, peaceful, private, far from the road so Stephen's fans and the paparazzi won't be a bother. I had to admit, Brooke was one of the sexiest news anchors on TV. I enjoyed watching her read the news, though she hadn't been on BBC since marrying Stephen. Damn it, if Brooke's going to be on daytime TV, I won't get to watch her as much, I muttered. What can I say? I'm a man, after all. Why would you need to watch her on TV when she'll be living right next door? You'll probably see her all the time. Yeah, sure. I can just picture us, old fogies, hanging out with Brooke and Stephen, I laughed. I'm sure we'll see a lot of them. They seemed really nice. I even told Stephen you wouldn't mind him using your gym. You did what? When we renovated the barn, I'd set aside a room overlooking the pool and turned it into a gym. Now, I'm no fitness fanatic, but I enjoy messing around with the equipment now and then. It's just my macho side coming out. I've always been one of those guys who didn't put on weight over the years. 18 years after I got married, I could still fit into the suit I wore on our wedding day. Penny, on the other hand, couldn't exactly say the same, though she still looked great to me. The gym was really for her, but until then, she hadn't been too keen on using it. Well, surely you don't mind Stephen using it. You hardly ever go in there. I don't know, I thought to myself. Maybe if Penny's crush is using the gym, she'll start spending more time in there too. No, of course not. It's fine, as long as he doesn't hog the place. I'm sure he'll only use it when Brooke's at the TV station and you're at work. Though, he'll probably want to use it on weekends as well. Now, you might be wondering why I wasn't too worried about Stefan Walters, this so-called Greek god, spending time in my house with my wife, who practically worshipped him. Well, the thing is, I'm 52, Penny's 51, and Stefan? He's nearly half our age. Penny's practically old enough to be his mother. And from what I'd heard, before he married Brooke, he had hundreds of young women after him. What possible interest could he have in a slightly pudgy mother of two? And remember, Penny continued, trying to sell me on the idea. If Brooke comes over on weekends, you'll get to see her in her workout gear and maybe even a bikini. Bet you'd like that, you old perv. I told them they could use the pool whenever they wanted. It seemed like Penny had already made up her mind about all this. I was left with no choice but to go along with her plans. The first change I noticed was that Penny seemed to be getting a little more affectionate. After we had the kids, Penny had slowed down in the bedroom. For years, she'd never been the one to initiate anything, except for the occasional time she'd gotten a bit tipsy at a party or something. Don't get me wrong, I knew Penny enjoyed our intimacy. Once she got into it, there was no stopping her. But, for the most part, I was the one to make the first move. But all of a sudden, her nightwear began to change. It got more revealing, then it got skimpier, until, eventually, it seemed like she wasn't wearing anything at all. And at the smallest hint of intimacy, she was jumping right into full gear, if you catch my drift. Then, I started noticing that she was dropping weight pretty quickly. It was obvious she was spending a lot more time in the gym. I soon found out that she'd been working out every day with Stefan. And that, well, that was the problem. Because I started feeling a bit jealous. I was glad she was taking care of herself, but the better she looked, the more I realized just how stunning she really was. And with Stefan's fans being kept away, I couldn't help but wonder if Stefan would start to see the beauty in her that I had always seen. Stefan struck me as the type of guy who was used to attracting attention from women, so I started getting a little worried. I held my tongue for about a month, but eventually, I asked Penny how things were going with Stefan. She blushed, something I didn't like, and assured me that he was the perfect gentleman. Well, that set off alarm bells in my head. If there was one thing I was sure of, it was that Stefan Walters wasn't exactly the definition of a gentleman. Gentlemen don't grope young girls, after all. You're not getting a little sweet on Stefan, are you? I asked, trying to keep a smile on my face. And what exactly are you implying? Penny snapped back. Nothing. I just wouldn't want you getting too close to him, that's all. You're my wife. What, do you think we're going to have an affair in the gym while you're at work? Penny asked, her voice sharp. Whoops. This wasn't going the way I planned at all. Unfortunately, Penny thought I was accusing her of something. Not exactly the smartest move. I figured I better try to smooth things over quickly. Don't be silly, Penny. I would never think that. Hell, you're practically old enough to be Stefan's mother. Big mistake. I know that now. At the time, I was just speaking without thinking, but that comment was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. And once it was said, there was no taking it back. So, you think I'm some old frump, do you? Penny shot back. Well, let me tell you, I could still turn more heads than you could. At that point, I should have just kept my mouth shut. But, like any foolish husband, I had to try and turn the tables. Well, for a man my age, I don't think I look too bad. I've kept in shape, and if I wanted to, I'm sure I'd have no trouble attracting women. Well, I could attract any man I wanted to. Penny fired back. Honestly, I can't remember how the rest of the argument went, but it definitely didn't go how I had hoped. I wanted to warn Penny about getting too friendly with Stefan, but instead, I ended up practically challenging her to seduce him. After that night, and for a few nights following, our sex life took a dip, though not for long. Penny quickly went back to being the passionate woman she had become since Brooke and Stefan moved in. But I was still worried, and that feeling didn't go away. So, I made a few adjustments to the CCTV system. I repositioned the camera that overlooked the swimming pool so I could just barely see into the gym. And I moved one of the indoor cameras into our bedroom. I had wired every room in the house when we renovated, but by then, I was using a wireless system. All the cameras were connected to a huge PC in my office, where any motion detected by the cameras was automatically recorded onto one of several hard drives. To be honest, I don't think I ever actually checked the footage, except for when I was playing around with the system. The whole setup was a waste of money, but, to be fair, the TV company had footed most of the bill, so I wasn't complaining. Anyway, one evening, when Penny was over visiting Brooke and Stefan, I decided to check what had happened that day. I fast forwarded through the footage until I saw Stefan come over to our place around 1 p.m. He went into the gym and started working out. Penny joined him shortly after, and for the next hour or so, they worked out together, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. Then Penny went into the kitchen, came out with coffee for both of them, and they took it outside to the patio to drink. They chatted for a while, and Penny went back inside for a bit. When she returned, she was in her swimsuit and jumped straight into the pool. Not long after, Stefan went to the changing room, came out in his trunks, and joined her. They swam and played around for a bit, but again, nothing seemed off. Once they got out of the pool, they lay on separate loungers, soaking up the sun for a while. Then Stefan went back to working out, and Penny took a nap for a bit. Later, she went inside and disappeared. I switched to the camera I'd placed in our bedroom and watched Penny go into the ensuite. I assumed she was taking a shower, and then she came out dressed in cut-off jeans and a short t-shirt. God, did she look good. Then she went back downstairs and out onto the patio again. After more time spent on the lounger, she went into the gym and talked to Stefan for about 20 minutes. Then, to my surprise, they both went into the house. Now, this was the part where I messed up. The camera I'd set up to monitor the hallway and stairs also covered our bedroom. I checked all the other cameras, but I couldn't find them. The lounge, the family room, and our master bedroom were all empty. There wasn't a camera in the kitchen, so I couldn't check there. I definitely needed to fix that. But by then, it was too late. An hour later, the footage showed them back in the gym. Stefan worked out some more while Penny spent time in the garden until the kids arrived home from school. The thing was, I still had no idea where Penny and Stefan had been for that hour. I cursed myself for not installing more cameras inside the house. I checked the guest rooms, but found no signs they'd been used. That night, I tried to act normal, but I think Penny could tell something was off. The next day, I called the company that supplied our CCTV system from my office and arranged for a couple more cameras to be sent over via overnight delivery. I didn't get a chance to check the recordings that day, though, because Brooke and Stefan came over for dinner, and Stefan and I ended up playing snooker until late into the night. I didn't want either of them to get the wrong idea and suspect that I thought something was going on. If I was wrong and my suspicions turned out to be unfounded, I'd be in deep trouble, especially with Penny involved. Trust me, I've been there before. The cameras arrived at my office on Friday morning, but by that night and for the whole weekend, I couldn't find the time to install them. Penny or the kids were always around, and I needed at least an hour to install each camera properly. Unfortunately, the opportunity never came up. So, I had to come up with a backup plan for Monday. I decided to adjust the beds in both guest rooms. It was a simple task. All I had to do was carefully arrange the duvet under the bedspread. The odds of someone disturbing the duvet, especially if they sat on the bed, were next to impossible. But if they actually got into bed, it was highly unlikely that the duvet and bedspread would end up exactly how they were before. When I came home from work Monday evening, I hit the jackpot. One of the guest rooms had clearly been disturbed, while the other was untouched. Now, I had to consider that maybe Penny had just made the bed again, so I didn't jump to conclusions. I just set the bed up again for the following day. I still didn't get a chance to install the cameras, but I did find time to check the footage. Every weekday, there were about 45 minutes to an hour when Penny and Stefan were in the house, but I couldn't track their exact movements. The following evening, I was convinced the guest bed had been disturbed again. So, what was I going to do now? I didn't bother installing the rest of the cameras because, by then, I already knew what was going on. But I still didn't know what to do about it. You see, I love Penny, and I didn't want to lose her. We've been a team for 26 years, even though we haven't been married that long. We've lived together for most of that time, though, and for the first 8 years, we weren't married. There were a couple of times back then when we had some silly arguments and even separated for a couple of months. During those breaks, we even dated other people. But somehow, we always ended up back together. We had some challenges early on because both of us had been married before. I think it was more about trust. We were both worried about making another mistake. After you've been hurt, you're hesitant to jump in again. Penny and I didn't have that whirlwind, love at first sight feeling. Our love was more like being very close friends, confidants, really. It's the kind of love that's steady and lasting. But now Penny seemed to be playing games with Stefan. I was pretty sure that's what was happening. I didn't like it, and I wasn't going to stand for it. But I didn't want to explode and destroy our marriage if I could help it. If I could quietly end whatever was going on and make sure it didn't happen again, I'd be happy. Let me take a step back and tell you about how Penny and I got together. My first marriage happened when I was 18, almost 19. I thought Michelle was the girl of my dreams. She was a year younger than me, and, I admit, I knew she had a bit of a reputation. But love makes you blind, and I had a father who, at the time, was considered rich. I suppose that had something to do with Michelle noticing me. We got married, and for 2.5 years, everything seemed perfect. That was until I found a letter from an abortion clinic. Michelle had gotten a termination without telling me. After some discussion, it came out that she hadn't been sure I was the father and didn't want to take any chances. There was a good chance that baby could have been mixed race. The divorce that followed was a nasty one. Michelle got alimony, but that didn't last long because she remarried some other poor guy. Apparently, he caught her in bed with yet another guy less than a year later, and I think he's still doing time for manslaughter. The guy Michelle had been with supposedly fell from their 6th-floor apartment window, according to her husband. The judge probably didn't believe her story, though. So, after feeling pretty disillusioned with the world, I went back to bachelor life for a while until I turned 26. One night, I was at a party hosted by an old school friend. One of the other guests was this jerk who I remembered from school. He was the type who thought he was tough, bullying all the little kids but running away when there was a real fight. Anyway, he had a girl with him who, I was told, was his wife. The way he spoke to her was appalling. I don't know what happened exactly, but Penny, who was his wife, must have said something wrong because the guy slapped her in front of everyone. Sometimes, fate steps in. I had never liked this guy and I wasn't going to stand for him hitting a woman. Without thinking, I laid him out with one punch. Down he went, out cold. When he came to, he apologized to Penny, who hadn't said a word since he hit her, and then apologized to me and everyone else at the party. Then they left. One of my other friends joked that he thought the jerk would take it out on Penny when they got home. So, I decided to follow them, just in case. I had a couple of mates with me, whether they came to help or just to watch, I'm not sure. Well, Penny's husband didn't wait until they got home. He started on her in an alley just down the road from the party. So, I laid him out again, and someone called the cops. Penny wasn't in the best shape, so they took her to the hospital. The next day, I went to see her. She told me she was terrified of going back to her husband, who, as I suspected, had been using her as a punching bag whenever he felt like it. I don't understand why women put up with that kind of abuse, but Penny wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last woman I'd meet in that situation. Back then, the police just considered it a domestic, and they'd sweep it under the rug. Thankfully, things have changed since then. Penny was scared to go home, so she ended up coming back to my place. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I was still playing the good guy, and Penny had her own room. Long story short, Penny never really moved out again. Not for more than a month or two at a time. Over the years, our relationship evolved from flatmates to best friends, then to lovers. 8 years later, with our first child on the way, we got married. For the past 18 years, we've been devoted to each other. Now, don't get me wrong, we've had our fair share of fights over the years. We've teased each other and flirted with other people. I'll admit, I've been pretty close to crossing the line a few times at the sports club. But I'm pretty sure Penny doesn't know about any of it. So, if she was having a little fun with Stefan, I couldn't really complain too much. Now, I had to figure out what to do about Stefan. I thought, if the mountain was already there, the best thing to do was get rid of the mountain. So, the following weekend, I caught Brooke when she was alone. Brooke, I'm not sure how to say this, but there's a clause in the rental agreement that says if there's a clash of personalities, I can give you 30 days to vacate. And that's exactly what I plan to do, I told her. Brooke looked at me, clearly shocked. Why, Tim, what on earth happened? I thought we were all getting along so well, especially with how close the houses are. Let's just say they're a little too close for my comfort. Oh no, he hasn't, has he? Did Stefan say or do something to upset you or Penny? I paused for a moment before deciding to stir the pot. He's not upsetting Penny. No, Brooke, it's actually the opposite. Let's just say I believe Stefan is keeping her very happy, and in doing so, he's upsetting me. I'd prefer if Penny and I were still married when you two decide to leave. To my surprise, Brooke smiled. I must have looked furious because the smile vanished almost immediately. I'm sorry, Tim, but I think you've got this all wrong. Sure, Penny might be enjoying herself, but if you think Stefan's sleeping with her, I can assure you that's not happening. But I will admit, he's quite good at keeping a woman happy. But only to a certain point. Tim, can we please go inside and let me explain? Brooke said, leading me into the lounge. She grabbed a video camera, switched it on, and placed it on a shelf, pointing toward us. Looking at the camera instead of me, she said, "Tim, what I'm about to tell you is a secret that cannot get out. I need you to promise me, on this recording, that you won't share this with anyone. I'm not sure if it will stand up in court, but if you tell anyone what I'm about to say, I'll have my lawyers take action. Do you promise?" I glanced at the camera, confused, then back at Brooke. "I promise, Brooke," I said. "All right, here goes, and I really hope you're a man of your word. Stefan is not having intercourse with Penny, or anyone else, for that matter. You see, after the accident, Stefan lost the necessary equipment." "Don't make me laugh, Brooke. I've seen that huge bulge in his swimming trunks." "Well, Tim, if only it were that simple. All that glitters isn't gold. What you see is thanks to some very skilled plastic surgeons. It looks impressive, but I'm afraid it doesn't work. He has no feeling in it at all. Not in the way you're thinking, anyway. He can't even get it to stand up on its own. There's no way he could have sex with anyone. Stefan is completely sterile and has full erectile dysfunction." "I don't get it. For erectile dysfunction, you can get implants or other treatments. I remember reading about a guy who got a pump to make it work. Why hasn't Stefan done something like that?" "Tim, Stefan's entire career as an actor is built on his looks. He's the big romantic leading man who sweeps women off their feet. What do you think would happen if this secret got out? The tabloids would have a field day. His reputation would be shattered. Stefan's not that foolish. He knows he couldn't trust himself not to try and get involved with one of his young co-stars or a fan. Just imagine what one of those girls would do if they saw him trying to pump himself up. Can you picture the headline in the tabloids? Everyone assumes Stefan is so in love with me that he's practically invulnerable. Because no matter how hard they try, he never takes the bait." Sorry, I couldn't resist the pun. "Wait a minute. So, what's he been doing with Penny then?" "Ah, now here's the catch. Stefan loves women, and I'm sure Penny is getting what she needs from him. Stefan is incredibly skilled when it comes to giving a woman pleasure, especially with oral sex. What he does with his tongue is beyond words. But he's definitely not having intercourse with Penny. Tim, what are you going to do? Penny's being unfaithful, just like Stefan is to me. Look, if you want us to move out, we will. But can we come to some kind of personal arrangement about all this?" Plus, 4 months later, Penny and I were watching the final news segment of Brooke's show for the season. Brooke had just announced to the world that she was 3 months pregnant. Penny was stunned, unsure of how to react, and I had to work hard to keep a smirk off my face. The last few months had been exhausting, so I was looking forward to a break, but Brooke had already promised me she'd be back for a rematch next year. Life goes on.